The school was a place of routine. The sound of the bell ringing, the shuffle of feet in the hallways, and the chatter of students as they made their way to their classes. It wasn't a big school, but it was close-knit. Everyone knew everyone, and the principal had earned a reputation for being strict but fair. His name was known, respected, and occasionally feared. He was the kind of principal who believed that rules were there for a reason, and he expected everyone to follow them. No exceptions. In one of the classrooms, a boy sat at the back of the room, his arms folded tightly over his chest. He was different from the other students, quiet, withdrawn, and always questioning everything. It wasn't that he was rebellious, not in the typical sense. He didn't cause trouble or misbehave. Instead, he had an attitude that said, "Nothing matters." He had a way of shutting out the world around him, as if he didn't care about anything. His teachers had all noticed it. There was a certain emptiness in his eyes, a kind of resignation. He didn't seem to care about school, about grades, or about the things that most students seemed to value. And this bothered the teachers, who were always trying to motivate him, to get him to open up, to care. But no matter how many times they tried, the boy remained the same. At the morning assembly, the principal stood at the front of the room, addressing the students. His voice was firm and commanding, but there was a kindness in it too. He spoke about the importance of working hard, of striving to do your best, and of believing that school wasn't just a place to pass time, but a place to build a future. He believed in the power of education to change lives, to open doors, and to create opportunities. And he believed that every student, no matter their background or circumstances, had the potential to succeed. Most of the students listened, their eyes fixed on the principal as he spoke. But not everyone. The boy at the back of the room was staring out the window, his expression blank. He wasn't listening. The words seemed to slide off him like water off a duck's back. He had heard it all before, and it didn't mean anything to him. He had his doubts about everything the principal was saying. He didn't see how learning algebra or memorizing history dates would change anything in his life. None of it felt real to him. As the assembly came to a close, the principal asked the students to stay seated for a moment. He had something he wanted to address, something that had been bothering him. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the faces of the students, and then they landed on the boy at the back of the room. "You there?" the principal called, his voice cutting through the low murmur of students. "Yes, you." The boy flinched, surprised that he was being singled out. He didn't want to stand out, didn't want attention, but the principal's gaze was steady, unwavering. Slowly, he stood up and walked toward the front of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. The principal didn't smile. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the boy with a steady, calm gaze. "I've been noticing something about you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't seem to care about anything. You don't participate in class. You don't get involved in school activities, and you don't seem to believe in what we're trying to teach here." The boy felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. It wasn't that he didn't have anything to say. He just didn't know how to explain it. The truth was, he didn't care. It wasn't that he didn't want to care, but it just didn't seem to make a difference. The principal didn't wait for a response. He continued, "I'm going to make a challenge for you. You're going to prove me wrong. You're going to show me that you can care, that you can get involved, that you can believe in something. Because I know that you can." The boy felt a knot form in his stomach. He wasn't used to being challenged. In fact, he didn't think he could rise to the occasion. He didn't think he could prove anyone wrong, especially not the principal. But the principal's words hung in the air, and something in the boy shifted. Maybe it was the way the principal had looked at him, not with anger or frustration, but with belief. As if the principal truly thought he was capable of more. "I'll tell you what," the principal said, breaking the silence. "You don't think anything matters, fine, but I want you to prove me wrong. Do something for yourself. Get involved in something, anything. Show me that you can be more than just someone who doesn't care." The boy stood there, unsure of what to say, but there was a small spark inside him, one that hadn't been there before. Maybe the principal was right. Maybe he could change. Maybe he could prove that he was more than what he thought he was. The principal nodded, as if sensing the shift in the boy's demeanor. "I'll give you time, but this is your chance to change things, to make something of yourself. Don't waste it." With that, the boy turned and walked back to his seat. The room was quiet, and the other students were looking at him, some with curiosity, others with surprise. The boy didn't care about them, not really. But something had changed in him. He wasn't sure what, but he felt something shift deep inside. As the bell rang and the students filed out of the assembly hall, the boy walked through the hallway, his mind racing. He couldn't stop thinking about the principal's words. Prove me wrong. The challenge felt impossible, but at the same time it felt like an opportunity. He had spent so much time doubting everything, doubting himself. What if he could be more than that? What if he could actually change? At lunch, the boy sat alone at the back of the cafeteria, pushing food around on his tray. He didn't feel hungry. It was hard to concentrate on anything when his mind was spinning with the principal's challenge. The other kids around him were laughing and talking, but he didn't feel a part of it. He felt distant, separated from them, as if he were watching from the outside. One of his classmates, a girl who sat nearby, looked over at him and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" The boy shrugged. "Yeah, I guess." The girl smiled, but there was a kindness in her eyes that made the boy feel something. He wasn't sure what, but it made him uncomfortable. He didn't like feeling vulnerable, didn't like the idea of people looking at him with sympathy. He wanted to be invisible, but the girl didn't seem to mind. She just kept talking, sharing some random thought about a movie she had watched over the weekend. For a moment, the boy forgot about the challenge. He just listened to her talk and it felt normal. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. Maybe he could get involved even just a little. After lunch, the boy walked to his next class feeling a little lighter. The principal's challenge was still weighing on him, but it didn't feel as impossible as it had before. Maybe he could try something new. Maybe he could find something to care about, something that mattered. The bell rang and the boy stepped into his next class. He took his seat, his thoughts still drifting. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time he was willing to find out. The next day felt different for the boy. It wasn't because anything had changed drastically, but because something deep inside him had shifted. He woke up with a sense of unease in his chest, a feeling that had been absent for a long time. The principal's words from the day before echoed in his mind, over and over again, "Prove me wrong." It wasn't a harsh challenge, but there was something about it that pushed him in a way nothing ever had before. He got ready for school. His movements automatic, but his thoughts were racing. What did the principal mean by "prove me wrong"? How was he supposed to change? The boy wasn't sure he even knew how to try. When he arrived at school, the usual buzz of energy filled the air. Students were chatting, laughing, and heading to their classes. The hallway was as noisy as ever, but the boy felt disconnected from it all. Everyone seemed to be going about their day like normal, but he was stuck on one thing. What was he supposed to do? He had never really believed in anything, not fully. It wasn't that he was a bad person. He wasn't rebellious or angry. He just didn't see the point in trying. Everything felt like it had been decided already, like the world had a script that he was just following along with. But now, with the principal's challenge hanging over him, he couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than he had allowed himself to believe. The first few classes passed by in a blur. He sat in his desk, barely paying attention to the lessons. His mind kept drifting back to the principal's challenge. He knew he had to do something, but what? It wasn't like he had any obvious talents or interests. He wasn't the smartest kid in class, and he definitely wasn't the best at sports or anything like that. So what was he supposed to prove? The bell rang for lunch, and the boy made his way to the cafeteria, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his thoughts. He didn't have any close friends, so he sat alone at his usual spot, at the back of the room where no one would notice him. He picked at his food, lost in his thoughts, until a voice interrupted his quiet. "Hey, are you okay?" It was the girl from the day before, the one who had smiled at him during lunch. The boy looked up, surprised to see her standing there. She was holding a tray of food, her eyes curious but kind. "I'm fine," he said, shrugging his shoulders. "Okay, if you say so." She sat down across from him, her tray clinking lightly as she set it down on the table. The boy didn't know why, but he felt a little embarrassed. Why had she even come over? He hadn't asked for company. But there was something about her, something different from the usual group of students who avoided him. She wasn't pushing him, just sitting there, letting the silence hang between them without making him feel awkward. "I saw you at the assembly yesterday," she said, taking a bite of her sandwich. "You seemed kind of out of it." Was it because of what the principal said? The boy looked at her surprised. You think I care about that? Well, you didn't seem like you were paying attention during the speech. And I saw how he called you out afterward. Not many people would like that, she said, her voice matter of fact. The boy sighed, unsure of how to explain. I don't know. It's just, I don't know if it matters. I don't really think I can do anything about it. The girl raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. Do you want to do something about it? He didn't know how to answer that. He had spent so long convincing himself that it didn't matter, that nothing he did could make a difference. But now, sitting across from this girl, listening to her talk, he started to wonder. What if he did try? What if he could find something to care about? I don't know, he said slowly. The principal made it sound so easy, like all I had to do was just change. But it doesn't feel that simple. The girl nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's not easy. But maybe you don't have to change everything at once. You could just start with one thing, something small. The boy thought about that for a moment. He hadn't really considered it like that. Maybe it didn't have to be this huge dramatic shift. Maybe he could start with something simple, something that wasn't so scary. Maybe, he said quietly. I could try, joining a club or something. I've never really done anything like that before. The girl smiled, her eyes lighting up. That's a start. It doesn't have to be anything big, but it's something. You might even like it. The boy felt a small spark of hope, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Maybe the challenge wasn't as impossible as he had thought. Maybe he could try something new. As the lunch period ended, the girl stood up and waved to him. Good luck with your club thing, okay? I'll see you around. The boy watched her leave, a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it was close. He had just spoken to someone, and it hadn't been awkward. For the first time, he felt like maybe he wasn't so different from everyone else. The rest of the day passed by in a haze, but the boy couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with the girl. He didn't know if joining a club was the answer, but it was a start. It was something small that he could control, and that felt like a step in the right direction. The next morning, the boy woke up with a sense of determination. He didn't know exactly why, but something had shifted. He had spent so much time hiding from everything, so much time convincing himself that nothing mattered. But now he was starting to think that maybe it did. Maybe he didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe he could start small, and that was okay. He got dressed, ate his breakfast, and headed to school. This time, the hallways didn't feel so overwhelming. There were still the same students, the same teachers, the same familiar faces. But today, the boy felt a little different. He wasn't just floating through the day. He was present, trying to be aware of what was going on around him. When he arrived at school, he walked straight to the bulletin board in the hallway, where the list of clubs was posted. He had never paid attention to it before, but now he was curious. There were so many clubs, sports, music, art, and even a debate team. The boy didn't know where to start. He didn't have any real interest in sports, and music wasn't his thing. But the debate team? He had never thought of himself as someone who liked to argue, but the idea of joining a group, of being part of something, felt good. With a deep breath, he wrote his name on the sign-up sheet. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He didn't know what he was doing, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. The boy's heart raced as he walked into the debate team's first meeting. The feeling of uncertainty was back, creeping up inside him. He had never been a part of something like this before, and everything felt unfamiliar. The room was filled with students, some chatting with friends, others reading through papers. He stood at the door for a moment, unsure whether to step in or turn around and walk away. He had never considered himself good with words. His thoughts were often jumbled, and he wasn't sure how to express himself clearly. In school, he was the quiet one, the one who kept to himself and avoided attention. But today was different. He had made a decision, even if it was small, and now he had to stick with it. With a deep breath, he walked into the room, trying to appear confident even though he didn't feel it. A few heads turned as he entered, and for a moment he wondered if they were judging him, if they were wondering why he was there. But then someone waved at him from a table in the corner. A boy probably around his age with a welcoming smile. "Hey, you must be new." "You're in the right place," the boy said, gesturing to the empty chair next to him. The boy nodded, feeling a little relieved. At least someone seemed friendly. He sat down, and the others in the room went back to their conversations. He didn't know anyone here, and he was okay with that. It meant that he could be anyone he wanted, even if it was just for an hour. The meeting started with a brief introduction from the team's leader, a girl with short hair and a confident voice. She explained how the team worked, the topics they debated, and the skills they would develop. The boy listened closely, trying to take everything in. It seemed like a lot to learn, but he was willing to try. As the meeting went on, the boy started to feel a little more at ease. The other students seemed to have their own way of speaking, their own rhythm. They argued and discussed ideas with passion, but it wasn't aggressive. It was more like a conversation, a back and forth where everyone respected each other's opinions, even if they didn't agree. The boy didn't say anything during the meeting. He wasn't ready for that yet. But he found himself listening closely to the others. There was something captivating about how they could express themselves so easily, so confidently. They didn't hesitate to share their thoughts, even if they didn't have all the answers. It made him realize how much he had been holding back, how much he had been afraid to speak up for fear of being wrong or misunderstood. As the meeting came to an end, the girl who had introduced the team spoke up again. "Next week we'll be holding a mock debate. It's just for practice, but we want everyone to participate. Don't worry if you've never debated before, just give it a try." The boy felt a lump form in his throat. A debate? In front of everyone? He wasn't sure if he was ready for that. But then he remembered the principal's challenge. "Prove me wrong." The boy wasn't sure how this all fit together, but he realized that this was his chance. If he was going to show that he could change, this was a part of it. He looked over at the boy who had greeted him earlier. "Do you think I could do it?" he asked quietly. The boy smiled and nodded. "Of course. It's just practice. No one expects you to be perfect. Just speak your mind." The boy wasn't convinced, but he appreciated the encouragement. For the first time, he felt like maybe this could be something he could do. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was just about trying. The week that followed was a blur. The boy spent his time after school reading, practicing arguments, and thinking about the upcoming debate. He had never put so much effort into something before, and it felt strange. It felt like he was actually preparing for something, like he had a goal. He read through the topic for the debate, a simple discussion about whether school uniforms should be mandatory, and tried to form his thoughts. He had a lot of opinions, but he had never really shared them before. It was one thing to think about something in your head, but it was another thing to say it out loud in front of people. It wasn't easy. But each time he thought about backing out, he remembered the principal's words. "Prove me wrong." He didn't want to let the principal down. He didn't want to prove that he couldn't change. And so he kept going. He wrote down his points, practiced his delivery in front of the mirror, and even tried speaking in front of his little sister, who didn't understand the topic but listened anyway. When the day of the mock debate arrived, the boy was nervous, but he was ready. He walked into the debate room with a sense of purpose. He wasn't sure how he was going to do, but he wasn't going to back out. The room was full, and the atmosphere was different today. Everyone seemed more focused, more serious. The team leader explained the rules of the debate, and the students took their seats preparing for the event. The boy sat at the back of the room, feeling the nervous energy build inside him. His heart beat faster as he thought about the moment when he would have to stand up and speak. He wasn't sure he was ready for that. But when the first speaker stood up to present, the boy felt a little more at ease. The speaker wasn't perfect. They stammered a few times, but it didn't matter. They spoke with conviction, and that was what mattered. The boy realized that it wasn't about being flawless. It was about getting your point across, even if you made mistakes. When it was finally his turn, the boy stood up, his hands shaking slightly. He had prepared, but now that he was standing in front of everyone, the words felt hard to find. He cleared his throat, trying to steady his nerves. I believe that school uniforms shouldn't be mandatory," he began, his voice shaky but strong enough for the room to hear. "They don't allow students to express themselves. Everyone is different, and wearing the same clothes doesn't reflect who we are. It's important for people to have the freedom to express their individuality, especially when they're growing up." He paused, trying to gather his thoughts. He looked around the room and saw a few faces nodding. That gave him some confidence. "School should be about learning, not about forcing everyone to look the same," he continued. "Uniforms can create a sense of conformity, and that's not what school is about. It's about finding your voice, your passions, and your identity. If we're all dressed the same, how can we celebrate our differences?" The boy finished his argument, his heart racing. He wasn't sure if it made sense, but it felt good to say it. It felt like something he had been holding in for so long. As he sat back down, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had spoken up. The rest of the debate went by quickly. The boy didn't win, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he had stepped up. He had taken the challenge and faced it, even when he wasn't sure he could. As the meeting came to an end, the boy felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not because he had won, but because he had tried. He had pushed himself to do something new, something difficult. And that was enough. As the students filed out of the room, the boy caught the eye of the team leader. She smiled at him. "Great job today," she said. "You did really well for your first time." The boy smiled back, his heart swelling with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Maybe he didn't have all the answers. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but he had taken the first step. And that felt like everything. The boy woke up the next morning feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: excitement. It wasn't the kind of excitement that came from a big event or a celebration. It wasn't even something that could be easily explained. It was the quiet thrill of knowing that something inside him had shifted. He wasn't sure where this new feeling came from, but it was there, deep inside him, like a spark waiting to catch fire. The debate wasn't something he had won, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he had spoken, that he had tried. And that had felt better than anything else. For the first time, he wasn't just floating through life. He was actively doing something. He was trying. As the days passed, the boy found himself thinking more about the debate. It was the first time he had spoken in front of a group without feeling like he was just pretending to be invisible. He had voiced his opinion, and while he didn't expect anyone to agree with him, the point was that he had been heard. That was enough to keep him motivated. His classmates began to notice a change in him, too. At lunch the next day, the girl who had spoken to him the week before came over to his table. She smiled at him, her eyes bright and friendly. "Hey, I saw you in the debate yesterday." "You did really well." "I wasn't sure you'd actually speak up, but you did." The boy was taken aback. "You thought I wouldn't speak?" She shrugged, her smile never fading. "I mean, you were so quiet before. But hey, that was awesome. You really made a good point." He felt a flush of pride. It was strange to hear someone compliment him, especially someone who wasn't one of his close friends. He had always been the type to keep to himself to avoid attention. But now it felt different. It felt like maybe people were starting to see him for who he really was, not just the quiet kid in the back of the class. "Thanks," he said, smiling back at her. "It was kind of scary, but I'm glad I did it." "Scary?" She laughed. "You didn't look scared. You were confident up there." He shook his head. "I don't know about that. But I'm glad it didn't go too badly." The girl sat down across from him, still smiling. "You should do it again. You have good ideas. You just need to keep speaking up." The boy felt a warmth spread through him. It wasn't the kind of warmth he usually felt from his family or close friends, but it was different. It felt like encouragement, like a small but powerful push forward. Over the next week, he began to feel more comfortable in the debate team. The meetings were still nerve-wracking, but they no longer felt impossible. He was starting to get the hang of how to structure his thoughts, how to present his ideas in a way that was clear and convincing. It wasn't about winning every argument, but about being able to stand up and speak his truth. Without fear or hesitation, one afternoon, as the boy was walking to the debate meeting, he noticed something different. There was a new sense of purpose in his step. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. He was choosing to be there, choosing to be part of something that was making him grow. When he arrived at the meeting, he saw the girl from the lunch table already there, sitting with a few others. She waved at him as he walked in. "Hey, ready for today?" He nodded, his nerves starting to creep back in. "I think so. I've been practicing." "Good," she said. "You've got this. Don't overthink it. Just speak from your heart." Her words were simple, but they gave him something to hold on to. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just trying to be himself. And that in itself was enough. The meeting started, and the topic for today's debate was more complicated than usual. It was about whether technology was improving or harming education. The boy had his own thoughts on the subject, but he wasn't sure how to approach it. The other students were all prepared with notes and ideas ready to go. They spoke with confidence, throwing out facts and statistics to back up their points. The boy listened carefully, picking up on how they structured their arguments. It was a lot more formal than he was used to. He had always just spoken his mind, but these debates were different. They were more structured, more thought out. Finally, it was his turn. He stood up, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his notes. But as he glanced around the room, he realized something. It didn't matter if he was perfect. It didn't matter if his argument wasn't as polished as the others. What mattered was that he was there, and that he was trying. So I think technology has definitely helped education. But it also has its downsides, he began, his voice shaky at first. I mean, we can learn more than ever before, right? There's the internet, online courses, apps, but at the same time, it can also be distracting. We spend so much time on our phones or computers that it's hard to focus sometimes. And if we rely too much on technology, we might forget how to learn on our own. He paused, taking a deep breath. He hadn't planned for this moment, but now that he was speaking, the words were coming easier. I don't think we should get rid of technology, but we also shouldn't let it control how we learn, he continued. It's about balance. We need technology, but we also need to be able to think for ourselves. As he finished speaking, he felt a sense of relief. He had said what he wanted to say, and it had felt natural. There had been no pressure, no fear of judgment. He had simply spoken his truth. The team leader gave him an encouraging smile as she called on the next person to speak. The boy sat down, his heart still racing, but now with a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about winning the argument or being the best. It was about showing up, about trying, and about growing. After the meeting, the team leader pulled him aside. You did great today, she said. I could tell you were nervous, but you got through it. You're really improving, the boy smiled shyly. Thanks. I'm still not sure I'm good at this, but I'll keep trying. That's all anyone can do, she said with a grin. Keep practicing and you'll get even better. As he left the meeting that day, the boy felt something new. It wasn't just a feeling of relief. It was a deeper sense of pride, the kind of pride that came from knowing that he was working hard, that he was challenging himself, and that he was growing. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The weeks flew by faster than the boy expected. At first, the idea of trying something new every day, challenging himself, stepping out of his comfort zone had seemed daunting. But now it was becoming second nature. He found himself looking forward to the debate team meetings, and even the nerves that once made him sick to his stomach had started to fade. Instead of fear, he felt a sense of excitement when it was time to speak up. His confidence was growing slowly but surely. But it wasn't just the debate team that was changing him. His entire approach to school and life was different. He was paying attention in class, answering questions he would have ignored before, and even helping out classmates when they were struggling. It felt good to be involved, to not just sit back and let life happen to him. For once he felt like he was making a difference, even if it was in small ways. It wasn't perfect. He still had moments when the old doubts crept in, when the voice in his head told him he wasn't good enough or that it wasn't worth trying. But now he had learned how to push those thoughts aside. He knew that if he kept going, if he kept showing up, things would get better. One afternoon, the boy was sitting in the school library, working on a project for history class. It was a quiet moment, just him and the stacks of books around him. He had been reading for a while, trying to find the right information when he heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, he saw the team leader from the debate club standing in front of him. Hey, are you busy? She asked, her voice friendly. The boy looked at her, surprised to see her here. Not really. Just working on a project, she smiled. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to talk to you about something. He raised an eyebrow, curious. Sure, what's up? She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. I've been thinking about the upcoming debate competition, she said. I know it's still a little ways off, but I wanted to ask if you're interested in representing our team. I think you've really come a long way, and I believe you could do well. The boy froze. Represent the team? In a competition? He had never even considered something like that. He had been happy just participating in the meetings, just speaking up when it felt right. But now being asked to compete? It was a huge step. He wasn't sure if he was ready for something like that. I don't know, he said, his voice trailing off. I mean, I've just started getting comfortable speaking. What if I mess up? What if I let everyone down? The girl looked at him, her expression understanding but firm. Everyone starts somewhere, and you've already made so much progress. You're not the same person who walked in here a few months ago. I can see how much you've grown, and I think you can do this. Besides, no one expects you to be perfect. It's about trying and learning, just like you've been doing. The boy took a deep breath, unsure of what to say. His mind was racing. Part of him wanted to say no, to stay in his comfort zone. It was safer there. But another part of him knew that this was the next step. This was what the principal's challenge had been about. Prove me wrong. Prove that you can be more than you think. And right now, this felt like the perfect opportunity to do just that. I'll give it a try, he said, his voice more confident than he felt. I'll do it, the girl smiled widely. I knew you'd say yes. I'll let the rest of the team know and we'll start preparing. You're going to do great. As she left, the boy sat there for a moment processing what had just happened. He was going to represent the team. He was going to compete. The reality of it was both exciting and terrifying, but he knew he couldn't back down. He had come so far, and this was the next challenge. It wasn't just about winning the debate. It was about pushing himself further than he ever had before. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. The boy spent hours after school researching, practicing his speaking, and working with the debate team. They worked together, discussing different strategies, analyzing the topic, and figuring out how to approach their arguments. The boy had never worked this hard on something in his life, but it felt different. It felt like it mattered. He wasn't the best speaker in the team, not by a long shot, but he was learning. And that's what kept him going. Every time he stumbled over a word or lost his place, he didn't give up. He would take a deep breath, try again, and keep improving. It wasn't easy, but he was starting to enjoy it. The more he practiced, the more he realized that he was capable of doing things he had never thought possible. The day of the competition arrived, and the boy woke up feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. He hadn't slept much the night before, his mind racing with thoughts about the debate. What if he forgot everything? What if he messed up in front of everyone? But then he remembered what the girl had said. It's about trying and learning. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up and doing your best. When he arrived at the competition, he could feel the tension in the air. There were students from other schools, all wearing similar uniforms and carrying the same nervous energy. The boy took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he was ready. Ready to face the challenge. Ready to show everyone, including himself, that he could do this. The competition started, and the boys' team went up against a school that was known for its strong debate team. Their arguments were sharp, well-researched, and confident. The boy listened intently, taking mental notes, but he didn't feel defeated. He knew that even though their arguments were strong, his team had something different: heart. They had been preparing for this for weeks, and they were determined to give it their all. Finally, it was the boy's turn to speak. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood up, but he reminded himself of everything he had learned. He wasn't perfect, but he had come a long way. He wasn't just speaking to win. He was speaking because he believed in his argument. When he spoke, his voice was steady and his words flowed more easily than they ever had before. He talked about the importance of technology in education, but also about the dangers of relying too heavily on it. He spoke from the heart, and even though he was nervous, he felt like his words mattered. By the time the debate was over, the boy was exhausted but proud. He had done his best. He hadn't been perfect, but he had been real. And that, he realized, was more important than anything else. The competition ended and the team didn't win first place. But it didn't matter. The boy had done something far more valuable. He had faced his fears, pushed through his doubts, and shown up when it counted. He had done something he never thought he could do. After the competition, the team gathered to debrief, and the girl came over to him. "You were amazing," she said, her voice sincere. "You did exactly what I knew you could do. You were awesome up there." The boy smiled, feeling a sense of pride wash over him. He wasn't just the quiet kid anymore. He wasn't just the one who didn't speak up. He had proven to himself and to everyone around him that he was capable of more. And as he walked out of the building that day, he realized something important. It wasn't the competition that had changed him. It wasn't the trophy or the accolades. It was the journey. It was the effort. It was the belief that he could do something, even when he wasn't sure he could. The principal's challenge had come full circle. He had proven himself wrong, and in the process, he had discovered something even more valuable, that he was enough just as he was, and that he could keep growing, keep learning, and keep pushing himself further than he ever thought possible. The days after the competition were quieter, but the boy felt like something had changed. The pressure of the debate had faded, and yet the feeling of accomplishment stayed with him. He wasn't thinking about trophies or recognition anymore. What mattered now was that he had faced something big and had come out stronger. He had stepped out of his comfort zone, challenged himself, and shown himself that he was capable of more than he thought. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect. Far from it. There were still moments when self-doubt crept in, when he wondered if he was good enough or if he was really cut out for this. But those moments were fewer now. Each day he found himself getting a little braver, a little more willing to take risks. School had become easier. He had more confidence in class. He participated more in discussions even when he didn't have all the answers. He realized that it wasn't about knowing everything. It was about being willing to ask questions, to learn, and to grow. And when he did speak up, he wasn't afraid of being wrong anymore. In fact, being wrong didn't seem so scary. It was just part of the process. One afternoon, as he walked through the school halls, the boy was surprised to find that he didn't feel so invisible anymore. People said hello to him now, smiled when they saw him, and there was a new sense of belonging he hadn't had before. He was no longer the quiet kid in the back of the room. He was part of the conversation, part of the group, and it felt good. As the weeks passed, the boy became more involved with the debate team. They met more often, preparing for the next competition. But now he didn't just attend because he had to. He went because he wanted to. He cared about the team, about their success, and about the ideas they were discussing. He found that he enjoyed it, the give and take of debating, the challenge of presenting an idea and defending it. It wasn't just about arguing. It was about understanding, learning, and growing together. One day, after a particularly intense debate meeting, the boy stayed behind to help clean up. As he was folding up the chairs, the girl from the team approached him. She had been one of the first people to believe in him, to encourage him when he was still unsure about his ability. "Hey," she said, giving him a small smile. "You've been doing great lately. You've really come a long way. I'm proud of you." The boy smiled back, feeling a rush of gratitude. "Thanks, I feel like I'm actually getting the hang of it. I didn't think I'd be able to keep up at first, but now I kind of look forward to it." She laughed lightly. "That's awesome. I can see it. You're not just showing up anymore. You're really participating. It's been great to see you grow." The boy nodded, a little embarrassed by the compliment, but grateful all the same. "I never thought I'd be one of those people who actually enjoys debating." "It's weird." She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Weird in a good way, I hope?" "Definitely," he said with a grin. "I never realized how much I like talking about stuff, how much I actually have to say. I guess I just needed a little push to get started." "You're not the only one," she said with a knowing look. "Everyone starts somewhere. But it's not about how you start, it's about how you keep going. And you're doing great." For a moment, the boy just stood there taking in her words. He realized that she was right. It wasn't about the beginning. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up every day, doing your best and learning from the process. "I think I'm ready for the next competition," he said, the words feeling right as they left his mouth. It wasn't just about proving to others that he was capable. It was about proving it to himself. The girl smiled warmly. "I think so too. And no matter what happens, just know that you've already done something amazing by getting this far." The day of the competition arrived, and the boy was nervous, but this time, it wasn't the crippling kind of fear he had felt before. It was the nervous energy of someone who was about to do something he cared about, something he had worked for. This time he didn't just want to compete. He wanted to show up for himself, to give it his all, and to enjoy the experience. As he stood backstage waiting for his turn, he looked around at the other teams. They were all dressed in their debate uniforms, talking to each other, going over their notes. Everyone seemed so confident, so put together. And for a moment he wondered if he was out of his depth. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he couldn't keep up? But then he thought back to everything he had learned over the past few months. He wasn't the same person he had been. He had grown. He had pushed through fear and doubt. And even if he didn't win today, he had already won something much more important. The team leader came over to him, giving him a nod of encouragement. "You ready?" The boy smiled, feeling the familiar spark of confidence light up inside him. "I think so." When it was finally his turn to speak, he stood up, took a deep breath, and walked to the front of the room. The familiar rush of nerves hit him, but instead of letting it overwhelm him, he embraced it. It meant something. It meant that he cared. It meant that this was important. As he started speaking, the words flowed more easily than he had expected. He spoke about the importance of using technology in education, but also about the risks that came with over-reliance on it. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew what he believed. He spoke with conviction, not because he was confident in every detail, but because he had come to trust his own voice. When he finished, he sat back down, his heart still racing but his mind clear. He had done his best, and that was all that mattered. The rest of the debate went by quickly. There were moments of doubt, moments when the boy wasn't sure if his argument was strong enough, but he didn't let them derail him. He kept pushing forward, speaking his truth, learning from every word. By the time the competition ended, the boy was exhausted, but he felt something he hadn't expected: peace. He didn't care about winning anymore. He didn't care about being perfect. He cared about the process. He cared about showing up, about learning, and about doing his best. When the results were announced, his team didn't win. But it didn't matter. Not to him. The real victory had already happened. He had shown up. He had pushed past his doubts. He had grown in ways he never thought possible. After the competition, the team gathered around, talking and laughing. The boy felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt before. He wasn't the outsider anymore. He wasn't the quiet kid in the back of the room. He was part of something. He was part of a team that supported him, challenged him, and helped him become more than he had ever thought he could be. As they walked out of the competition hall, the team leader turned to him. "You did great, seriously, you've come so far." The boy smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "Thanks. I couldn't have done it without all of you." It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about the journey, the growth, the challenges, the lessons learned along the way. And in that moment, the boy realized that he had already won something far more important than any trophy or title. He had won his own belief in himself. The weeks that followed the competition were a mix of reflection and growth. The boy found himself thinking about everything that had happened, about how far he had come in such a short amount of time. It wasn't just the competition that had changed him. It was the entire journey. The quiet, unsure kid who once hid in the back of the room was now someone who was stepping up, speaking out and taking risks. And every time he did, he realized more and more how much potential he had. But there was still a part of him that wondered, was he truly ready for everything ahead? The next competition was already on the horizon, and the team was preparing harder than ever. Everyone was putting in their time, practicing their speeches, perfecting their arguments. The boy was too. But this time there was a feeling of nervousness that he couldn't shake. It wasn't the typical stage fright that came before speaking in front of a crowd. It was something deeper. He knew that as much as he had grown, there was still so much more to learn. As the debate team met in the library to go over their strategies, the boy found himself sitting at the back, listening intently. He was still amazed at how much knowledge everyone else had, how they could rattle off facts, statistics, and historical references with such ease. But he also noticed something else. There was a certain anxiety in the air. Everyone was pushing themselves harder. They were all trying to be better, to be perfect, and to win. The girl who had been such a big support to him in the beginning approached him, her voice filled with concern. "Hey, I noticed you've been a little quieter than usual. You okay?" He looked up at her, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine, just thinking a lot, I guess." She sat down next to him, her expression softening. "I get it. It's easy to get overwhelmed. But you've come so far. Don't let the pressure get to you." "I'm just worried about the next competition," the boy admitted, his voice lower than usual. "What if I mess up? What if I can't keep up with everyone else?" The girl gave him a knowing look. "That's the thing about growing. It's never going to be perfect. But you can't let that stop you. You're already doing something most people don't even try. You're speaking up. You're showing up. That's what matters." The boy listened carefully, her words sinking in. He had made progress, yes. But there was still so much fear and doubt inside him. What if he wasn't as good as the others? What if they were all better prepared, more knowledgeable, more confident? I guess I just feel like I'm not ready for this, he confessed. You might not feel ready, but trust me, she said, leaning in a little. You're more ready than you think. You've already proved that. The hardest part is over. You've stepped outside your comfort zone. Now you just need to keep going. Her words were a small lifeline, and the boy found himself clinging to them. The doubt didn't disappear completely, but it felt smaller now. It wasn't the giant, overwhelming mountain it had been before. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but that didn't mean he couldn't keep growing, keep trying. As the debate team continued their preparation, the boy found himself practicing more than ever. He spent long hours at home reading through his notes, rehearsing his arguments, and even recording himself speaking. He still stumbled at times, still second-guessed his points, but each time he did it with more confidence. He wasn't trying to be flawless anymore. He was trying to be authentic. It was in these moments, alone in his room or sitting with his teammates, that he realized how much he had changed. There was a quiet strength building inside him, something that wasn't about winning or being the best. It was about resilience. It was about showing up, even when you didn't feel ready. The day of the next competition arrived faster than the boy had expected. The nerves were there, but they were different this time. They weren't the paralyzing kind of nerves that made him want to run away. These were the kind of nerves that came with anticipation, the feeling that he had something to prove, not to anyone else, but to himself. As he stood backstage, waiting for his turn, he felt the familiar weight of uncertainty press against him. The team was talking quietly, going over their final points, but he was lost in his own thoughts. What if he forgot everything? What if he couldn't keep up with the other teams? Just then, the girl from the team caught his eye and gave him a small, reassuring smile. "You've got this," she said quietly. The boy nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. This wasn't just about the competition anymore. It wasn't about proving he was the best or better than anyone else. It was about pushing through his doubts, standing up for what he believed in, and taking the next step in his journey. When his turn came, the boy took a deep breath and walked to the front of the room. His legs felt a little shaky, but he reminded himself of everything he had learned, of all the practice he had done. He was ready, not because he knew everything, but because he was willing to try. The audience was quiet as he spoke, but it wasn't intimidating anymore. It wasn't the fear of speaking in front of others that he had struggled with before. It was the focus on his message, on what he wanted to say. He talked about the importance of empathy and leadership, the need for understanding in a world that seemed more divided than ever. He didn't have perfect answers. He didn't have all the facts and statistics that other teams had, but he spoke from his heart, and that made all the difference. As he finished, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had done his best. He hadn't been perfect, but he had been real, and for the first time, he realized that was more than enough. The rest of the competition went by in a blur. The boys' team didn't win first place, but as the final results were announced, he didn't feel disappointed. He didn't feel like he had failed. Instead, there was a quiet sense of pride that washed over him. He had done what he came to do. He had spoken his truth. He had shown up. After the competition, the team gathered in a quiet corner, talking and laughing about the experience. The boy felt a deep sense of connection with everyone there. It wasn't just about the debate anymore. It was about the journey they had all shared, the way they had grown together. The team leader came over to him, giving him a smile of approval. "You did amazing today. I'm proud of you." The boy smiled back, feeling the warmth of her words. "Thanks. I'm proud of all of us." As they left the competition hall, walking together toward the buses, the boy realized something important. It wasn't about the trophy or the medals or even the recognition. It was about the growth. It was about the journey of becoming someone who wasn't afraid to speak up, to challenge himself and to face his fears. And that, he realized, was the real victory.